Good evening, everyone, and welcome to class on Shalom Bayit. It's a conversation on Shalom Bayit, and in truth, this is a conversation I've been having for a really long time. Just a little bit about me. I was married in 1998, and my wife and I were supposed to spend 1 year spending time in Israel, just honeymooning for a year, and 1 year turned to 4 years. I was never intending on going the rabbinic route. And somehow I did, and I committed for 2 years of spending time in America, giving back to Jews on campus. I was a chaplain at Long Island University and Brooklyn College for about 5 years, and during that process on campus, when you're working with students, eventually at that age I started getting married. So very quickly I had to figure out how to communicate about marriage in a way that made me someone who was worth listening to. Because there's no real preparation for marriage. For those of you that are in relationships and married, you know that marriage is one of the most rewarding and most challenging things in the world. Now, I've had the suchut of marrying 232 couples over the last 14 years. And it's been a lot of fun, Baruch Hashem. I've met with thousands of young couples. And the truth is that even now, I still get phone calls every single day. People who are in relationships, who have questions, challenges, issues. And most of the time I get all the complaints, and seldomly I'll get like a picture. Oh, Rabbi, remember, here's the baby, here's the this, whatever it is. I don't get those enough. We're in the month of Shvat. Tomorrow night is Tu Shvat. So the Mekubalim, the Kabbalists, point out something fascinating, that each month has particular tikkun, has a particular rectification that is associated with the month. So the months of Tevet, Shvat, and Adar are 3 months that are lump sum together, and they all represent months that have to do with human needs. The month of Tevet represents intimacy and a tikkun in physical needs, touch specifically. The month of Shvat, the month that we're in right now, is the month of food, of being mitaken, the relationship with food. People don't realize this, but the word for food is mazon. And the word for inappropriate relations is znut. The root word for mazon and znut is zan, same root word. Why? In the same way that food allows you to maintain a relationship with your body, intimacy allows you to maintain a relationship with your spouse. It's a connecting force. Urges are not necessarily negative things. These are things that need to be channeled and focused so you can have this more holistic relationship with the self and the higher self, and the self and the spouse. So the month of Shvat has to do with fixing the nature of our relationship with food, and the month of Adar, which is the next month, which means, by the way, 4 weeks away from Wednesday is Purim, which means 8 weeks away is, I'm not going to say it, Pesach. I guess I'm going to say it anyway. It's going to happen very quickly. And so you have 3 months that have to do with these kinds of relationships. Now, if I could do an anecdotal study, I would tell you that starting in the month of Tevet, really from the month of Kislev, the month before, I already start getting phone calls, first from the singles. Around Hanukkah time, I get all the singles calling me, Rabbi, it's dating, it's so tough, it's so hard, and I'm looking for someone, it's so difficult, it's the loneliness of the holidays and so on and so forth, it's a terrible time. And then in the month of Tevet, the month after Hanukkah, I start getting the phone calls from the couples. Rabbi, it's so difficult, my husband, my spouse, this and that. My favorite phone call I got this past week, it was 2 weeks ago, I got a phone call from someone in the city. She says, Rabbi, I got into a big fight with my husband. He's not talking to me anymore. What happened? She's like, we were out with friends last night, and I made this comment, and he got very sensitive about it. I'm like, what did you say? She's like, I said, my husband likes to touch his phone more than he likes to touch me. I'm like, you said this out loud? She's like, yeah, in front of his friends. She's like, yeah. I'm like, well, what do you think was going to happen? She's like, I don't know. Do you think he's overreacting? I'm like, no, I don't think he's overreacting. There's certain things that have to be kept inside, and certain things that should have to be kept outside. Now, it's interesting because she doesn't think she did anything wrong, right? And she's a good person, and he's sensitive. Everyone's here sensitive, and it's complicated because human beings are complicated, and it's supposed to be complicated, and we're going to get to why it's supposed to be complicated. Now, we'll start off with the most unfortunate aspect of marriage, which is divorce. The divorce rate in America is the highest it's ever been. Before COVID in 2019, the divorce rate went down for the first time over 30 years. The 30 past years in the United States of America, the divorce rates have been going up. In 2019, for the first time, it went down, and it's very deceptive. It went down from like 52.5% to 49.5%. And the only reason why it really went down is because less people got married in 2019. So it's not necessarily a reflection of the divorce rate going down, is that young people today don't really feel the need to be married anymore. Why should they get married, right? Now, when you actually look at the divorce rate in America, even if you're looking at that 49.5% number, that was in 2019, that was the last real big study that was done with Pew. When you add second-time marriages to the mix, the divorce rate in America is closer to 73.5%. Now, which is a terrible statistic. Now, if you're a thinking person or a betting person, an investing person, and I told you that, hey, 73% of all marriages crash and burn, would you ever fly? Would you ever invest in that stock? By the way, I can't tell you how many times I've used that statistic with young couples, and they say, oh, I would still get married. I said to them, if you knew, I'm talking to a couple that's not married yet, and I say to them, if you knew for a fact that 73.5% of all marriages crash and burn, would you still want to do this? And the guys always say, yes. And I say, well, why? Because, it's different because in a situation of a plane, you're not the pilot, but here we're in control. I'm like, you're a fool, and you're a horrible investor. Statistics are statistics. They don't lie. Numbers are numbers. Now, can I do things that break me out of that statistical, God forbid, eventuality? The answer is yes. And so, instead of talking about all the things that people do wrong in their relationships, I want to talk a little bit about some of the challenges. I want to talk a little bit about the things that we can do right. And then hopefully we'll walk away with something meaningful as far as what we can do to use this time of the year to develop a deeper connection with the people that we're married to, Bezrat Hashem. Okay, now everything goes, everything goes after the beginning. We say, right? Everything goes after the beginning, right? Well, what's the beginning? Whenever we talk about anything in Judaism, we always want to go to the root of it. And the root story of relationships start in Gan Eden, in the Garden of Eden. Okay? And so we're going to unpack that for a little bit. Number one, you have a guy by the name of Adam, or Adam. Okay? And he's created. Pasuk says that God created man in his image. He created them both male and female. Okay? That is in the first chapter 1, verse 27. And they were commanded to purvu ta'aretz v'kifshuha. I want you to go ahead and be fruitful and multiply, and I want you to conquer her. Now, the word kifshuha in Hebrew, okay, is written without a vav in that particular pasuk, which is a grammatical mistake. Okay, it should have had a vav in there. Chaser vav. Rashi, the commentator, points out, says, hey, why is there a vav missing in that pasuk? The kifshua, conquer who? Who is it talking about? Is it talking about the earth, as in the feminine? You have to go out, be fruitful and multiply, right? Go down to the sea and to the animals and conquer her must be referring to the earth, right? But since the vav is missing, the rabbis are pointing out that that verse is there to teach you something more. That it's not about conquering the earth. You can never conquer the earth because of time. Time always limits our ability to conquer space. But the kifshua over there is talking specifically about conquering her. Now, I know what you're thinking, because when I first read that Rashi, I was thinking like Fred Flintstone. You see her, you grab your bat, you pop her on the head, and you drag her into your cave, and I conquered her, I won, right? But that's not the conquering we're talking about. There's two kinds of conquering. There's a conquering with force, which is what Trump likes to do, right? If I don't get them out of 24 hours, they're gonna, all hell will let loose, that's one kind of conquering. And there's another kind of conquering, a more intelligent way of conquering, which is with words. A king could use his army to force you to listen to his commands, or a king can go ahead and use words to draw you out. And therefore, the first lesson of Shalom Bayit that is taught in the Torah is that there's this duality between husband and wife, and that the relationship is predicated where it is the masculine's role to conquer the feminine in that relationship. And what does conquering mean over there? Conquering doesn't mean screaming, doesn't mean using brute force. Conquering means that you're leading the way. Conquering means that you have a deep understanding of the needs and the wants of this person that you want to. Now, Rashi doesn't stop there. He says, "Shehazachar kovesh et hanekeva The masculine is there to conquer the feminine. And it's complicated. And and if you ask me, well, how does that work, Rabbi? I would say to you, it depends on the woman you're married to, right? Every woman's different. Every woman needs to be conquered in a different kind of way. Her needs have to be taken care of in a very specific kind of way. And therefore, it's every man's responsibility to figure out what that means and what that looks like. We can help you get there if you want. Those are private sessions. Anyway, so I'm not going to do that here. So anyway, and then Rashi goes on. He says, well, if not, right? She says, Shelo tihye yatzanit. Because if you don't conquer her, she will become a yatzanit. You know what yatzanit means? Yatzanit is a term that you see later on with Dinah. It says that Dinah was a yatzanit. Where did she go? She went out to see the children of Shechem. And what happens? You know how the story goes? Dinah, which is Jacob's daughter, Yaakov had one daughter that we know of in the Torah. She goes out to see the people of Shechem. She was curious. She was yatzanit. She went out of her family to see what was happening on the other side of town, and she was taken and she was raped. It's the first rape case that is brought down in the Torah itself. So, chas v'shalom, that we're saying that, that if, it's going to be that extreme, but I think the point that Rashi is making, that if you're unable to fulfill the needs of your spouse, don't be surprised if she starts looking elsewhere for those pleasures. As a matter of fact, if you actually look closer at the story of Adam and Eve, right? In the story in the garden, right? So all of a sudden the Nachash comes. And the Nachash starts talking to her and starts trying to convince her to eat from the Eitz Hadat, Tov Hara. And the question we should always ask is, why is he there? Anytime you read a story, you have to ask yourself, who is this guy? Why is he coming? Every story is the same. You have a good guy, you have a bad guy. And they're fighting here. Why is the snake getting himself involved in the story? What's he there for? What does he want? He just wants him to sin? Does it really matter to him? What is he? The truth is that there's one opinion that says that that the Nachash was in the garden when Adam and Eve were together. And after Adam and Eve were together, Adam rolled over and went to sleep, and Chava was still wildly curious, and that's where the Nachash saw an opportunity to come in and take advantage of her. He comes along and says, hey, wouldn't you like to try this, this Eitz Hadat Tov Hara, right? And so she had his attention, he had her attention simply because there was something that was lacking within her. Her curiosity was still piqued. She was unfulfilled, and therefore the Nachash was able to grab her attention and bring her someplace else. That's the beginning of the story of humanity. The story keeps going. Now, the first story is of Adam, being there with Chava or with Lilith. The first story of Adam and Eve is not actually Adam and Eve. The first woman that was created was Adam and Lilith. Lilith was a made from the earth in the same way that Adam was made from the earth, right? And there's two different opinions. One opinion says, Shtei Partzufim, they had two faces. One face was in the front, one face was in the back. Another opinion says, no, they were side by side, that both faces, male and female, it was one body that was both sexes, right? It was asexual, able to reproduce on its own. And then it says they were split, they were two separate bodies, unclear what they were, but everyone agrees that first parak, that first chapter in Genesis, that Isha was not Chava. Why? Because you look later on in chapter Bet, in the second chapter, verse, I think it's 15 or 14, it says, Lo tov liot adam levado, it is not good for man to be left alone. I say as a connecto. Well, I understand. You told me a few psukim before that he's married and he has a directive, and now all of a sudden he's alone. Well, what happened? Why is he alone? Chachamim point out that Lilith and Adam get into a big fight. She does not want to submit herself to him. She wants to be the boss. And when one person wants to be the boss in any relationship, it doesn't go down very well. As a matter of fact, today in 2025, Lilith, as far as a character, is still very much around. There's something called Lilith Fair magazine. It's a magazine about femininity and feminism. There's a Lilith Fair that happens every single year around the world, really to ascribe this particular midah of a woman being independent and being able to break away from her captive man, so she'll be free to do the things that she wants to do. This is still a philosophy that's around today. That's what she embodied, and it's still alive today. But Chava represents something different. Chava came from the rib, right? As a matter of fact, the Gemara asks, why did she come from the rib, and not from the eye, and not from the lips, and not from the hand, and not from something else? So they point out as the rib is something that has form, yeah, but it's still concealed. There's something special about the rib, that it came from the rib, okay? That's a whole other conversation about femininity. But in a nutshell, it says, Lo tov li adam levado. I say lo ezer kenegdo. Why was it bad for man to be left alone? Sometimes guys just want to be left alone. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be left alone. We need our space. But why is it bad for man to be left alone? What's wrong with man being alone? Coming back to Rashi, he says like this. He says, when man is alone, he comes to the following conclusion. Shtei rishiyoten, there are two powers in the world. Echad be'elyonim, one is a power above in the upper realms, and the other is a power in the lower realms. Which means that when man is left his own devices, he starts believing that he himself is a god. In the same way God is a god alone, man wants to be alone, and that's bad for man. Because man's ego can create this false perception that he is a deity. And therefore, when I was dating, and I remember this Rashi, I remember that the girl that I was going to marry was the first girl that's going to help me realize that I'm nothing but a mere man, right? When she popped the bubble of my infinite, immortal self, and reminded me I'm nothing but a guy, that's the girl I'm probably going to end up marrying. Something grounding about it. That the purpose of an isha is to remind her husband that you have to be grounded here. Don't get lost. And that's the dichotomy. Ezer kenegdo, right? You've heard this idea 1,000 times, that she's a ezer, a helper beside him, or keneged against him, depending on the relationship. Every single relationship is a different dynamic, okay? So one dynamic is a positive dynamic, and the other dynamic is a negative dynamic. What does a positive dynamic look like? What does a negative dynamic look like? A positive dynamic in a relationship starts like this. It's predicated on the idea that I understand that my spouse is an extension of me. If you don't believe in the idea that your spouse is truly a part of who you are, then you have two competing ideas in there, right? That's where it's negative. A positive relationship is when you understand that the needs of a spouse is truly an extension of your own wants and needs. And most of the time, the reason why we get into fights is because it's my will versus your will, or my need versus your need. The definition of a marriage in the Webster's dictionary is a merger of two corporate entities. What does that mean? It means that if you take out the garbage and you do and you mow the lawn, and the other person does the dishes and does the laundry, we got a great relationship here. Everyone's happy. But that also means that the second that something in that relationship stops to work, the whole entire thing falls apart. Right? That is most marriages in America today. It's a marriage of convenience. I'm conveniently married because I benefit from being in this relationship. And the truth is, if you're going to be super unemotional about thinking about your relationship, every relationship starts exactly for the same reason. You know what that reason is? Selfishness. Why? Because if you truly love the person that you want to marry, you should come to the logical conclusion that this person is too good for me to marry, and therefore I should find someone better for them. Just like a father, I asked this to, out of the 232 couples that I've married, 6 are divorced. 2 happened in the last year, and the 4 happened earlier on in my career. And the third person out of those 4, I told them not to get married. I told them not to get married because they didn't understand the nature of the relationship. Now, one of them, this is number 2, the second person that got divorced, I remember very vividly having this conversation, and the conversation went like this. I said to him, if you really loved her, you wouldn't want to marry her. He's like, why? And so I'm like, okay, if I imagine like this, imagine your wife was like your daughter. Would you want your daughter to marry a guy like you? He's like, me? Yeah, of course. I'm like, really? I'm like, I've asked this question to so many men. Every single guy, if you're intellectually honest, you'll say, I know the thoughts of men, and if they're like me, I'd rather them find someone better than me. Maybe there's a better guy out there, a little bit better than me. You're not a bad person, but like someone better than you. And this guy insisted, no, my daughter, she'll be the luckiest man in the world if she marries a guy like me. I'm like, I want you to know, I've asked this question to hundreds of men. You're the first guy to ever be so adamant about that, that your daughter will be lucky. You must be a very special guy. Never heard of that before, right? Anyway, 4 months later, I get the phone call from his ex-wife now. He was abusive, he was on drugs, he lied to me, he wasn't honest about who he was, and so on and so forth, right? And I remember the first thing I thought about, like, that guy, I knew something was off with that guy. No one ever gave me that answer. Months after they got divorced, he calls me up. He says, Rabbi, I want to apologize. So I say, about what? He's like, remember that time you asked me that question about whether or not I want my daughter to marry a guy like me? The answer is no. I would never want my daughter to marry a guy like me. I realize now I was in a bad place and so on and so forth. And I want you to know, this guy did teshuvah. He got remarried, okay? He made me do the wedding. And I wouldn't do the wedding unless I know that he finished 2 years of like hardcore like therapy. And I knew that he was in a place where he was gonna be in a happy, healthy relationship. And thank God he's married with children. This was years ago, it's like almost 14 years ago. And thank God they're doing really, really well, right? But the idea is, well, how do I perceive the nature of the relationship? Do I see this person that is sitting beside me as my opponent? Or do I see them as an extension of me, part of me? Because that defines the relationship. And I'll say more than that. When a couple understands that the nature of the relationship is to love, right? Let's define what the word love means. What does the word love mean? How would you explain it to somebody? What is love? Love is most often misconstrued because of Disney. You know, I grew up watching Disney, and I always thought that I'll know when I'm in love when all of a sudden squirrels and birds appear before, and I have music playing in the background, and you know, and everything feels great, and there's fireworks and explosions, and if that's what real love is, that's when I'll know that I'm in love. And you know what? It never happened for me. I never had the squirrels, I never had the birds, never had the explosions and so on and so forth. It never happened. Now, Disney ends every single movie with one line that I absolutely hate. And I've actually emailed them, asking them to amend it, right? How did their movies end? And they lived? That's the biggest lie. No one ever lives happily ever after. You know what I asked them to do? I asked them, I said, can you change it? I wrote a whole explanation why it's a disservice to people. And I said, you'd be doing a public service by ending it with, and they lived happily ever after a lot of work. Because that's true. That is emet. Anyone in a happy, successful relationship understands that there's a tremendous amount of effort, right, that has to be put into the relationship to make it a meaningful relationship. That's just the way it is. There's no easy in a relationship. There's only challenge and managing the challenge. That's all there is. You manage a challenge, you're managing, you're hopefully able to take this relationship to something more. Now, what is love? Love is a desire to give unconditionally, altruistically. Let me explain what that means, okay? Who loves you more than anyone else in the world? Hashem is always the first answer I get. Good, but let's make it someone more tangible. Your parents. And I would say out of your parents, depending on the relationship, most likely you'll say mom more than the dad. Not because the dads are bad, just mom's different, you know, they're softer, right? So why is it that what is the relationship like the parents? How is that love? What does that love look like? Security. So it's definitely security, but it's more. Sacrifice. You see, yes, good. Sacrifice. It's unconditional. Now, does it start out unconditional? No. Right? Oh, she's like, no, it's not unconditional. It's definitely not unconditional. Absolutely not. We had so let's say it like this. Ready? Now, of course, I believe that every parent has an intrinsic love for their child, but it's not unconditional, automatic. And I can prove it to you. How many children are given for adoption every single year? They're born, shalom, goodbye. Right? It can't be automatic. And some parents have certain children that it's easier to like more than other children. Just the way it is. Some parents are lucky, they love all their children, and every parent loves all their kids, of course, but some kids are easier to like than other kids, for whatever reason, right? So what is love? Our parents love us because they have given to you. It's because of the years of the consistent giving to a child that we love our children. The word ahava in Hebrew has a root word of hav, which means to give. At the core of loving means giving. And therefore, the more you give to something, the more you invest in something, the more you love it. That's just the way it is. Think about all the things you're involved in. The things that you love doing are the things you've invested in. If you haven't invested in it, you don't love it. Your mother, I would argue, has invested a little bit more than the dad because she's carrying you, she's feeding you, she's different level of giving and love that a mother has for a child that a dad doesn't have. And therefore, I would always argue a mom does it a little bit more. There are scenarios where dads can give more than a mother. But most of the time, naturally, it's a mom. Now, this is the best part. Ready? Who's in control of the relation between the mother and the child? Or the parent and the child? Is it the parent or is it the child? Who's in control? What? The parents. No, the parents are never in control. Right? Why are the parents not in control of the relationship? Because, exactly. The child is in control of the relationship because the child always loves less than the parents do. Because the parents are unconditionally giving to that relationship, the parents are always going to be there no matter what. They always want to be in that relationship. This is where parents make mistakes sometimes. And it's where children take advantage of their parents. Ready? In the relationship between man and God, who's in control of the relationship? It's a weird thing to say. Isn't God in control of everything? Yeah, except for your relationship with Him. That's what free will looks like. Okay? So now you have this interesting thing, you have this interesting dynamic. Parents naturally love their children to a flaw, unconditionally, and children do not. What used to happen in the old world, pre-industrial revolution, is that it was very simple. When a child became old enough to run the family farm or business, they did. And what did they do? They took care of the parents. And they naturally, societally learned to love the parents. The biggest mistake parents make in child rearing is not creating a space for their children to give back to their parents. As parents, if we don't create a space for our kids to give back to us, we're not teaching them to love us. I don't need my kid to get me a glass of water. I get it myself every single time. It's probably better for me to get it, actually. I need the steps, right? But I ask them to do it because I need to train them to give to me. That's the only reason why I ask. And the more and more I ask them to do things for me, they have their roles, their responsibilities, the more and more we train them to love us. Now, having said all of that with love, do you think you had that kind of love for the person that you married when you first got married? And the answer is no. That's crazy. So why did you get married? You didn't have love. No one has unconditional love when you're married. As a matter of fact, if you think about it and you're being, again, honest about it, right? Every single person gets married because of selfish reasons. And I'm okay with it. I'm okay for it to be selfish because you've picked this person selfishly for your own personal gain, and now this is your commitment for the rest of your life. Great. After you put the ring on, Kedat Moshe Israel, will you be consecrated to me with this ring? Right? Great. You're consecrated to that person. What does consecrated mean? The word kadosh, the word mikudeshet literally means that I am separating myself from everyone else on the planet, and I'm to you and to you alone and no one else. And that's what the Chatan and Kala are saying to each other. I am holy because I'm separating myself for you and to you alone. That's what the holiness of marriage comes from. But the unconditional nature of love only happens after the commitment of love is there. And commitment means commitment, right? There's a famous story of a shoeman who was, working away in his little shop, and it was late at night, and a man comes to the shop and says, I have shoes to repair, can you fix my shoes? He says, you see, as long as the candle is lit, I can fix. And I love that example. When I meet with a couple that's going through Shalom Bayit issues, you know what the first thing I look for? Who loves more in that relationship versus who loves less in that relationship? Because the person that loves more is not in control of the relationship. It's the person that loves less in that relationship that's generally causing the problems in the relationship. Do you understand that? The person that loves the most is always willing to do anything and everything to make the marriage work. The person who is committed the least in the relationship is the one that can walk away any time. And therefore, the challenge in that relationship is going to come from the person who is unable to express the highest level of love. It's never equal, by the way, in a relationship. It's not supposed to be equal in a relationship. There's always one person who's developed in one area more than the other person in that relationship. And that's okay. Because if you understand the nature of the relationship, that we are really one, and that we are an extension of the other, then the failings of the other is irrelevant. Because the purpose of the relationship is for me to grow from you and to learn how to see the world from a different perspective. You know, my wife grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. It's a mistake by the lake, all the way out by Lake Erie. And they used to call it the armpit of America. And, that's also, there's two armpits. You have all these ideas about what the nature of a relationship is supposed to be like. I grew up in Brooklyn, right? I'm a Brooklyn boy, a New York City kid through and through. And clearly, the cultural differences about what we were going to expect in that relationship were going to be challenged naturally, coming from different places. And I understood that very early on, that you're dating a girl from out of town. It's going to be a different kind of different beast. But the way I was able to overcome the challenge is by understanding that I don't have the answers to all the questions. Isn't it interesting that God created a world where your eyes are the senses that are set furthest back almost on your face? Like you have the nose before, you have the lips before, and then you have like the ears also all the way back. But the eyes being this visual force, right, that only allows you to see externally. Right? I have thoughts. I can hear my own thoughts. I can hear your voice, right? But I can't see myself. And we'd all say that seeing is believing. It's the most powerful, of all the five senses. Seeing is the most powerful of all the senses, right? But there's a limitation to seeing. Because seeing requires that you have somebody else that allows you to see the world through, allows you to learn to see the world through their eyes. That's what a marriage is supposed to be. A marriage is supposed to be the person's eyes behind your back, behind your head, who has your back literally and seeing from behind, someone's coming. You can't see because you're looking forward, right? It's that symbiotic relationship of two people coming together that allow this relationship to become something bigger and better. So the example I like to give is two examples, and you've heard this example before, for sure, and so have you. So the example goes like this, ready? You have imagine you have for a moment a library, okay? You walk into the library and you see a book in this section of the library and it's got your name on it. And the book right next door is your wife's or your spouse's. And look, honey, our books are right here. Two books, same section, we have so much in common. That's unfortunately most marriages in America. Two people living their own individual lives, writing their own story, very similar, benefiting from being in a relationship, right? The merger of two corporate entities, certainly not a marriage, right? That's the lowest level of a marriage. It could work, okay? A higher expression of a marriage is the following. I give you all a bracha that when you play the lotto, you win the next lotto, mega millions. Thank you. Okay, whoever said amen, just remember, I want a Porsche. Okay? So now, okay, you're gonna call me, Rabbi, I bought the ticket, let's go, yalla. Like, meet me in the city, 11th Avenue, 57th Street, we're gonna go to the 59th Street, we're gonna go to the Porsche dealer. Yeah, I'm like, come with me. I'm gonna walk into the shop, I'm like, look at this, it's so beautiful, 911, turbo engine. I'm like, let's open up the hood. I open up the hood, I show you it's beautiful in there, gorgeous, chrome, it says Porsche, it's stunning, right? So, I say, listen, when you look at this Porsche, what do you see? Do you see a tire? Do you see a piece of mirror? Do you see a leather seat? Or do you see a car? Right? And I say more than that. Come here, look even closer. I open up the hood, I'm like, look here. I take out my flashlight, my phone is there, right? I'm like, you see, this car becomes a car when you lower the engine into the chassis of the car, and you take the nuts and the bolts, and you screw that engine into the car, and that's when the Porsche becomes a Porsche. How much value do nuts and bolts have relative to the car? Not much value. Maybe Porsche that have cooler, that chrome, and it's a little bit nicer, but still not much more expensive. But you agree that that car becomes a car when those nuts and bolts cement that engine into the car. Super crucial, right? Now, the car is made up of thousands of pieces. Do you ever notice all the pieces in the car, or do you just see the car every single time? So how does a car become a car? Ready? This is the trick to marriage. And if you understand this, it was worth coming tonight or listening to this. Ready? Each piece of that car has to relinquish its identity to create the car. Do you understand that? If each piece of that car wants to be a screw or a bolt or a chair or a mirror or chrome or a tire, you could never have a Porsche. It's only when every single piece of that vehicle surrenders its identity can it create the car. You see the same exact idea in the Army. You have a unit. You're part of the Navy Team SEALs, Team 6, right? And you're going there to kill Osama bin Laden. So in order to do this, you have something called commander's intent, right? You have a very clear understanding of what the goal is. The goal is to go in there, kill nobody but Osama bin Laden. We're going to go in there. Now you have 30 guys you've been training. You decide, no, I don't want to go in the front door. I want to go in the back door. You can't do that. The only way the unit becomes a unit is if everybody in the unit is able to relinquish themselves to the needs of the unit. I need you to be my supportive right flank. You can't just go off on your own. You break the whole thing down. The challenge of marriage is, and this is a very deep idea, this is the goal. The goal of marriage is lihiyot basar echad. That's what the verse says. For two people to recognize that they are one. That all the hardships and the pain and the suffering that your spouse gives you, that's your pain and suffering. That's your challenge. Not their challenge, it's our challenge. That's what the nature demands. That's what the relationship demands. And therefore, when we talk about marriage, the challenge is, how do I keep working on this relationship so that I get to see the unity that this relationship brings to my life? How am I able to relinquish parts of my identity so that this marriage can actually become one? Because the thing that gets in the way of the marriage is me. I get in the way of the marriage. I want this, you want that. Who wins? Okay, this time you win, next time I win. Let's compromise. I hate the word compromise, and I think no one should ever compromise in their marriages. Why? See, compromise looks like this. Okay, I want to go to the basketball game, and you want to go to the ballet. We'll compromise. Monday we'll go to the basketball game. Monday we'll go to the ballet. Tuesday we'll go to the basketball game. Okay, so what happens? You come with me. I go with you to the ballet, and we're in the ballet. And I'm thinking like, oh my God, what a waste of time. Bunch of women dressed in tutus, standing on their tippy toes, twirling around. This is the stupidest thing ever. But we're gonna go to the game tomorrow. And tomorrow we go to the game, and I'm sitting there, I'm having so much fun, right? Watching the Knicks losing. And and then my wife's thinking like, this is the stupidest thing in the world. Like grown men running around, sweating and screaming and jumping like animals and throwing a ball into little baskets. And that, does that sound like compromise is gonna help in any way? And the answer is no, it doesn't. So let me teach you how to change that mindset of thinking. Ready? It's not compromising when a part of you wants to do something. If it's you and you want to go, are you compromising? That's what I want to do. So the shift that you need to have is like this. My wife says, let's go to the ballet. Oh, I didn't realize a part of us likes the ballet. It's different. It's not a compromise anymore. Because when I go with a part of me wants to do something, what I'm really saying is I need to understand why this aspect of our relationship exists. And therefore, when I go to the ballet, I'm not going with, begrudgingly, I'm doing you a favor. That's maintaining the separate identities in the relationship. That's what causes the friction in the relationship, right? But when I switch it around, no, my spouse's needs are my needs. And therefore, a part of me enjoys this thing called balleting, right? And therefore, when I go out, I'm going to try to understand this very differently. It's a very different approach to seeing the relationship. It diminishes the challenge in the relationship. And that's all I want. I want to figure out a way of taking this relationship and elevating it to the highest level. I'll tell you why. I'll tell you what's at stake. Ready? If you look at what we call the matzav of the world today, it's terrifying. You have this insane man who spent $8 million for a 30-second commercial during the Super Bowl to promote his website, and only for you to find out when you go to his website, he's selling one item, a T-shirt with a swastika on it, right? That's what Kanye West did, right, at the Super Bowl. His brand is Yeezys, he sells shoes, and when the company that was hosting the Super Bowl was Fox, and they agreed to this, they have to do some compliance, make sure that the ads are normal. They just saw him making his pitch, go to my website. Okay, they go to the website on Friday, and they see, the guy's selling sneakers, amazing. But when the ad aired, the website went down and they switched it, and the only thing they were selling is one T-shirt. Okay, $20 T-shirt with the Nazi symbol on it. They sold 100,000 T-shirts. I made $2 million on Sunday selling that T-shirt, right? Now, this just happened on Sunday. This is the world we're living in today, right?
People knew what they were buying?
They knew it. And then the sickest part of it is, forget about the T-shirt, but what bothered me even more than that was the item number. The item number was HH01, Heil Hitler, right? That's like this guy's like, he's insane, he's crazy. He said a couple of days ago on his X account that he's a Nazi and that whatever it is, this is crazy things. Like He's obviously going through a manic phase right now. He's crazy, right? But the bottom line is that there's this normalization of anti-Semitism and Jew hatred around the world today. Now, I've noticed, and I'm sure you have noticed, that unfortunately the world does not look very good right now. I feel bad for our children. Like, we got lucky, somewhat. Like, pretty post-Holocaust, we lived in a decent world, and now we're watching the whole thing kind of slide into chaos. Why is the world sliding into this crazy dark place? Ready? I'll tell you why I think we're heading where we are, okay? When parents are in a relationship which is all about convenience, they're teaching their children that the purpose of life is to take. When parents are in a relationship which is about taking from one another, right? Then the children say, okay, well, I'm just here to take as much as I can. Reminds me of a story of many years ago. I was visiting my friend in LA, and he sees me, and he said, I was introducing him to my children. I have 6 kids. They were very young at the time. He looks at me. He's like, are you crazy? You have 6 children? I'm like, yeah. What's wrong with that? He's like, there's not enough water. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, there's not enough air, and there's not enough food, there's not enough love. I'm like, are you crazy? What are you talking about? I'm like, you don't get it. I'm like, my kids aren't the problem. My kids are the solution. Why are my kids a solution? My kids understand that the purpose of life is not like you and your children who think that the purpose, your child, because you think, they believe the purpose of life is to take. And if we raise children with that attitude, it's all about taking from the world, you're right, there's not enough. But if we raise our children, right, with the example of having a happy, healthy, normal marriage, then we know what they're seeing are 2 people that are in love. What does love mean? To give. If we raise children that understand that life is about giving, you don't have the craziness that we have today. But so many children today, unfortunately, are raised in this very dark world where divorce is so rampant. Okay, we're talking about, we know for a fact, 50% of the country is divorced, right? And it happens. Sometimes divorces are not a bad thing. They're a good thing. But unfortunately, most of the time, they're a really bad thing. Okay? Now, because the world is so broken, you have children that are raised, all they want is taking. I want you to know, I'm happy for Elon Musk to go through the government and Doge and whatever it is. I'm happy for there to be accountability, right? But I wonder what's motivating the people to want that accountability. Is it because they really want transparency, or is it because they want to spend less money on taxes so they could take more from themselves? What's driving it? Is it truth, or is it selfish gain? Because if it's truth, I'm all for it. But if it's motivated by selfish gain, we're in trouble. Society's in trouble, it's sick. The reason why societies break down is because families break down. Families break down because parents break down. Why do parents break down? Most of the time, it's simply because either circumstance or a lack of information, lack of knowledge on how to overcome the circumstance. So there's a lot to unpack over here. It's big. This is why we say that a marriage is like a world. It's a microcosm of the whole entire planet. And what we create in our small families, in our communities, it matters. What's driving it? Are we really teaching people to live with unconditional love, or are we teaching them to live in a world of selfish taking? That's what's at stake right now. And this is what God says, Lo tov liot adam levado. We don't want you to be alone. The best thing, the Midrash says that when a man is alone, he's not even human. He's like an animal. You never learn to access the highest parts of your essence and your being until you're challenged with the challenge of being in a relationship. It forces you to see things in different realms, right? This is what marriage is. This is the goal of marriage. So there's I'm gonna end with this idea, and then we'll take questions, and we'll call it a night. There's a chicken and the cow crossing the road. This is a classic one. You guys should know this one.
Priest?
No priest in this one. Sorry. Anyway, so the chicken and the cow are crossing the road, and the chicken looks up and he sees a billboard, and on the billboard it says, breakfast, now serving steak and eggs. The chicken looks at the cow, he's like, oh, we're famous! Chicken and eggs! So the cow is not amused by the billboard. He looks at the chicken, he says, you can't compare the two. For you, chicken, it's merely a donation. But for me, it's a total commitment. Right? That is what makes a marriage work. Are you totally 100% committed to making it work? That's the only way it works. The way you make this thing work is by saying, no matter what, I will stand by this situation for the rest of my life until I figure out how to make it work. That's the only way it works. And in that process, what do you learn? You learn to love. Yeah. What do you want to say?
What if there's abuse or something?
Oh, of
like
course.
that?
I'm not talking about
Oh,
the
you're
worst
talking
case
about
scenarios. I'm
normal.
talking about, of course, I'm not saying there aren't reasons why a person, it's possible for a person to be in an unhealthy relationship, no question about it. I don't believe that a person should never get divorced. Obviously, there are circumstances where you have to, I've walked people to the get, I've gotten them get, I've done it. I'm not a believer you can never get divorced. There are scenarios where you have to get them divorced. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about in a normal situation, not the what ifs, in a healthy relationship between two people, right? Two people that are reasonable, you figure it out. And you stand by that person, you're gonna work it out. Because I'll tell you what ends up happening. What ends up happening is that the people that get divorced for the wrong reasons will often repeat the mistake over and over again, thinking that they'll find happiness. Because their happiness is all about their personal pleasure. Not realizing that the real happiness of a relationship is the sacrifice that you put into the relationship. So these are the challenges of the 21st century. We live in interesting times. I hope that all of our hostages are returned soon. I hope that the war in Israel, whatever it's over, I want peace. I want peace. I'm tired of it, and even though it's been 2 weeks, it's been very fascinating 2 weeks in this country, in America, I can't do this for another 4 years. It's too much for me. I want things to slow down a little bit. I want things to get back into a better, greater place. But everything that's happening right now in the world is a distraction. It's all distraction. Because the only thing we can be doing in this world is one thing. I believe, you don't know me very well. Some of you don't know me very well. I'm very much a rationalist. I like practical things. And even though I'm a very deeply spiritual person, I always struggle with the more esoteric parts of Judaism. I like things just yeshar, straight. Don't give me wuji, don't tell me a sigulot. I'm not saying you shouldn't do them. Make your brachot, have kavanah, do all of that, right? But I'm a very practical person by nature, right? I do believe in this thing called the Messianic era. I believe that we're living in Messianic times. And at the end of days, which if this is where we're at right now, the end of time, or time coming to a place where things are going to change very rapidly, which is what we're seeing. Maharal says that before Mashiach comes, 5 years will be a generation. Every 5 years will be another generation. Think about it. The generations used to be between our parents and our grandparents, right? And we saw generational gaps between parents and grandparents. Now, between parents and children, every 5 years, another generation. And I can tell you between my 23-year-old, my 25-year-old, who's my oldest, and my 8-year-old, which is my youngest, different worlds apart already. Different kind of kids. The world is moving very, very fast. And then when the world is moving very, very fast, the Gemara at the end of Sanhedrin says like this. He says that the students of Rabbi Eliezer said, Rabbi, what can someone do to protect themselves from Yemot Mashiach? Mashiach, the upheavals of Mashiach. He says there's 2 things you can do. Number 1, Talmud Torah. Talmud Torah can kulam. You gotta learn, educate yourself. The word Torah comes from the word hora'ah, which means instruction manual. What does Torah want? It wants you to be a good, normal human being that has honor and respect, that is able to love a world, to give back to humanity. Which is why Rabbi Eliezer says the second thing you can do is what? Chesed. Right? And the act of learning is supposed to get you to do chesed. Where does chesed begin? At home. Always. Always begins at home. The people that you have to be the nicest to are the people that you're closest to. The people that are the closest to you is where all the spiritual energy in the world comes from. Just fix that a little bit. Bring a little bit more love into the world, a little bit more selflessness, a little bit more giving. I'm telling you, we're so close. I feel it in my bones. We're so close. Never give up on the relationships that are healthy in your lives. Obviously, sometimes in an unhealthy relationship, you got to move on. But the ones that are amazing, never give up on them. And you'll find that love that you're able to provide in that relationship will permeate everything around you. B'ezrat Hashem, we will share in smachot only. Thank you so much for listening. Any questions, comments?
I have a question.
Go for it.
So let's say you're not married yet, and you're well, let's say going out with different people, and you want to know when you know that this is the person that you wanted to be able to give and do whatever you need to do to make it work for the rest of your life with this person. How do you know this is the right person?
Right, you never know.
Never know.
Sorry. So I'll tell you what helped me, because you never know, and there has to be a leap of faith. You'll never know 100%. Now I'll say more than that. Even the day after you're married, you won't even know. Right? You'll never ever know. You never know 100% anything.
Even 80%.
You're not going to know 80%. You're lucky if you know 51%. Okay? So what are you looking for then? Right? The most important things you're looking for is one, someone who shares your values. Number two, someone that you're attracted to. Number three, someone you could have fun with. Number four, someone you could share personal things with. And if all those four things are there, just get married already. Then the only thing that's stopping you is the only thing that's stopping that relationship moving on is you. Because you want to know 100%. You're never going to know more than that. Those are the four things you need to know. Values, attraction, fun, and you could share personal things with them, just get married already. Everything else is irrelevant. Don't worry about it. You'll figure out the rest. Yes?
You mentioned that the divorce rate in the US is 77?
73.5%.
Yeah. Is that data any better for Jewish?
That's a great question. So is the divorce rate the same in the Jewish community? Now, the data for the Jewish community is never good, obviously, because it's just smaller sample sizes. The last thing I saw is that even in Orthodox circles, the divorce rate right now is as high as 35%, which is still very high. It's the highest it's ever been, I think, historically.
So my question, the second part of the question was, you have different level of religious,
Correct.
Orthodox.
Yeah, so it's higher. It's higher. Reform often goes with the general culture, so it'll be higher, like in the 50-60% range, and then you have conservative a little bit lower, and then Orthodox lower.
Orthodox is 35.
Correct.
Because they get married early?
No, it has not. It could be that that's part of it. I don't think it has to do with getting married earlier. I think it has to do with the fact that they're educated more about it. When you look at universities today, there's zero conversation about a relationship. The professors often speak about pleasure. I had a girl student who told me that her professor encouraged her to have as many male relationships as she can before she got married. It's like ice cream, you'll never know the flavors you like until you try all of them. I'm like, who told that's the stupidest thing in the world? It's crazy stuff they tell these kids. It's a crazy world out there. So I think that no one really has this conversation. The conversation I'm having with you tonight is a conversation we should have had before you got married. You don't fully appreciate all of it because you didn't have the world and the life experience that you have to understand the nuances of it. But it's something I wish I knew before I got married. And it's certainly things that I teach to my students before they get married. Right? And when I post these classes online, I get the most response from non-Jewish audiences. Why don't they teach this in school? This is amazing. No one speaks about this stuff, but it's important. You gotta have the conversation. Anything else? Anybody else? I want to thank the athletes for having this, and it should be in their merit. We should have more and more skuyot and doing these great things together. Have a great night, everybody. Thanks for coming.